Seeking the wise.
With Aaron and Alexander discussing the just philosophy.
Covering self-development, emotional processing, conscious relationships, and 5 levels of overall wellness.
Thank you all for tuning in to another episode of the Wise podcast. I am Aaron Keith. Along with me is awesome Alexander.
Hello, everyone. So good to be with you. We're going to get into something a little bit different today, huh?
Yeah, we're gonna be a little more playful and read some stories from some Reddit threads about people seeking for clarity in their situations on whether they are overreacting emotionally to a situation or how they should handle a situation. And I kind of want to bring some of these stories in because they are real world examples of what we all go through from time to time. Relationship stuff, children stuff, neighbor stuff, just things that we all deal with and things that people often have questions about and how to handle these certain things. And when I read these threads, sometimes I feel that the conscious perspective is missing. And I thought it'd be a great idea for for myself to read some of these stories, and Alexander and I can discuss the details of these and offer ways to bring in consciousness, to bring in the just philosophy, ways to handle this in certain situations based on the perspective that the individuals in this situation may want to have, to repair their relationships, to do what is optimally energetic for themselves rather than just get some random person's opinion on Reddit. So I feel like this is cool and fun, and hopefully everybody out there loves it.
Yeah, and this is similar to what I do in my private sessions. What we're not going to have the availability to do is ask the person what they're looking to get out of this situation, because sometimes it could be around money, or it can be around saving a relationship. It could be helping the communication, many different things. But normally these types of situations is around gain and loss. And we're going to be, or I'm going to be sharing from the perspective of specifically around, somebody that's looking to do self-development work. Now, Aaron may play the role where he plays multiple different roles to give certain scenarios or possibilities of how it would be suggested to handle it if the scenario was different. If the person's looking to, maybe the relationship was more important to them than the money, and then to somebody else, the money may be more important. So see, when I work privately with somebody, I want to help them in the direction that they're looking to be helped, rather than just a stern way of approaching everything from one direction. And that was kind of some of the playfulness. And when Aaron suggested this, we thought we'd play around with it and just kind of see how we've talked a lot about his and my personal lives. And now we want to get just some everyday scenarios in that people are just going through day in and day out, and how to apply this philosophy.
Yeah. And I think we'll just jump right in and go right at it. So this first story, the title is, "Am I overreacting to my partner coming home drunk?"
Mm-hmm.
My partner and I have been living together for over a decade. We're both in our early 30s and have always maintained a balanced lifestyle, mixed healthy habits, and occasional nights out. Recently, my partner started a new job, and since then, he's been coming home drunk about once a week, usually on weekends. He claims that drinking is part of the company culture, and if he doesn't participate, he'll be seen as an outsider. This has caused several issues. There have been times when he came home late despite me not feeling well and needing his support, or when he came home heavily intoxicated the night before we had plans. He usually isn't excessively drunk, and he tends to come home by midnight, but it's still a major shift from his previous habits. In the past, he only got drunk on special occasions like birthdays, holidays, or nights out with friends. Now, this weekly drinking habit feels excessive, and to make matters worse, he doesn't drink at all with me anymore. It feels like I'm being excluded from his social life in the moments when he, quote, lets his hair down, which makes me feel hurt and left out. I know it might sound childish, but I want to be honest about my feelings. We've had calm conversations about this before, but tonight when he came home very drunk on a Wednesday, I lost my patience. I told him that I'm not willing to tolerate this anymore and that I'm seriously considering ending our relationship, which otherwise has been loving and healthy. Was this an overreaction?
Mm. Well, this is a good one to start with right off the bat because this is a common theme, whether it's alcohol or it's food or it's friends. um, People's choices outside of their intimate relationship is very common to be issues in relationships, especially when somebody does change all of a sudden. This was mentioned that this person changed after getting a new job and that the drinking seems to be part of the platform or what the company is about. Maybe it's just socializing. And here I feel like it's important to get across that there is a equilibrium in what we talk about acceptance and boundaries. And we want to work towards acceptance because anytime that we're carrying resistance, we're causing harm to all five of our levels: the physical, mental, emotional, energetic, and spiritual. And so we want to look to stay out of resistance as much as possible. But with that being said, sometimes there's a boundary that's needed to be set so that that friction isn't there. And this person says that they've talked about it, sounds like calmly, multiple times, but it doesn't sound like have made any leeway into um, meeting in the middle somewhere. So, and this is unfortunate that many times people will draw hard boundaries in a situation that's isolated like this. So it sounds like it's a lot to throw away type of a relationship for this one situation. So would, just highlight and shine the flashlight on the person that wrote this to say that, yes, this is more of your issue than it is your partner's issue, but you have the right to set whatever boundaries you feel like is healthy for you. But when we set those boundaries, see, boundaries and agreements are two different things. And many times I think people get these mixed up because a boundary is really something that you set and you're able to communicate what the cost is going to be if you overstep that boundary. Agreements are more like, hey, do you think that you could just do that once a week or once or twice a month rather than, multiple times a week? That this is getting into making agreements, is that one person poses that they have a major issue with what is happening. Maybe the person that's being judged for it justifies it, like this is part of the culture of this job. And, both parties need to, in communication, get clear on whether this is the direction that they want their lives to go in. Or is it just a job? And can that livelihood be made in a completely different type of situation? This was a situation that it has changed since they've been together. I think in the past we've talked about the possibility of somebody being married to a police officer and then having an issue with their job, and that's a different of whether the person become a police officer during the relationship or if they were already a police officer and this person knew that getting in. Here it is separated and it is something that new that has been initiated. And so the one with the issue with it, again, I suggest to approach it and be clear whether you're approaching it from a boundary issue or you're approaching it from an agreement issue. And the agreement is going back and forth and kind of like when you buy a car and the person offers a certain amount, asks for a certain amount, then you offer a certain amount, and then this person meets you a little bit closer and you go back and forth. Like that's many times the way that agreements are worked out, but that's not necessarily how boundaries are worked out. This person has the right to say, hey, if you come home drunk one more time, I'm leaving this relationship. But they've got to be prepared to initiate the cost if that boundary does get crossed. Now, in this situation, since it sounds like it's something that's new, I would suggest, starting out with some type of agreement. and seeing if something can't be worked with and adjusted on both parties, and give that a certain amount of time. I like to work with 3 weeks or 3 months, threes, to revisit the situation and after that period of time, and then renegotiate the agreement possibly. And see, all this is communicated up forward, that once the agreement is met, okay, can we try this for 3 weeks or 3 months and then reevaluate and get back together and talk about this again. Um, that's working with agreements. The boundaries is, yes, if you do this one more time, I'm going to leave the relationship, blah, 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 blah. So if this person is looking for self-development, then the person that's looking for self-development takes the majority of the responsibility on. And this may mean something that this person is bringing from a past relationship, because maybe possibly they're bringing baggage from either their family dynamic or past relationships around someone drinking when they're not involved, because that was another point that this person made, is that they don't drink with them anymore, then they're feeling excluded. So see, that brings up just a little highlight that there's a deeper issue here than the drinking, and there's an exclusion that is happening here. So see, there's multiple facets happening all at once, and that's kind of the preliminary, like, first steps to just get out to see what are we exactly looking to accomplish here. And most people don't start their conversations in that way. They just start in defending their side. So that's just kind of the first step, is getting clear in whether you're setting a boundary or you're working with an agreement. And then, are you working together, or are you kind of being stuck in your view and trying to get your way? Because this is what causes problems in communication. And so I think this is a good one and a common one to start off with. And anybody that's listening that don't deal with this around alcohol, just deal with it with whatever you do. For some people, like I said, it's hanging out with their friends. For some people, it's watching TV or playing video games. It can mean many different things. But I think this is a good place to start, and I'm interested to see what you have to add to it, just in this preliminary point.
Yeah, just for a little internet lingo for you, Alexander. When you want to like reference the person who wrote it, you can just call them the OP, original poster.
Okay,
That's the little lingo there.
very good.
Because we weren't sure, the gender of the person. It didn't say. Sometimes it will list the ages and the genders, so we can decipher it there. But in this situation, we don't know. I'm interested to know how the conversation went before, because it seemed like they said that they had discussed it a little bit before and it was kind of cordial. Did they make an agreement then? And then nothing changed. And that's maybe why the OP is kind of taking it to the next step where they are kind of talking about ending it. Now, that is setting a boundary, but that's setting a boundary and executing the boundary at the same time. And that may not be the best. It may want to be communicated, like the boundary may want to be communicated one more, like if you haven't communicated the boundary, you may want to, and the cost, and then give them a chance, right?
Right. Yes. And anytime ultimatums are given, very rarely do they have a good resolve, a so-called good resolve, because nobody likes that. Most people don't like that hard of a boundary being set. So this is why giving time frames to say something like, this is what I'm looking for over the next few weeks, is less of you coming home in this state and more of my involvement in it. And that question might be asked of, why are you choosing to do this with other people and now you're not choosing to do it with me? Because that person may have an answer to that. Possibly the OP here maybe don't handle their alcohol as well, or they get more emotional. We don't know this information, but we're going to approach this as we're talking to the OP, because that would be like the person talking to me. So right away, the question would be, Like, okay, have you made an agreement to where both of you could agree on the how often that this happens while both parties practicing being somewhat realistic? If this does have a connection to the job or the job title, which is understandable. There's different jobs out there that socializing and alcohol becomes part of the so called job. I'm not justifying that or agreeing with it. It's just what is out there. And this OP has the right to continue to communicate what kind of relationship that they are looking to develop over a longer period of time. And so I wouldn't say that this is this person overreacting, but it is obviously a sensitive subject. But the most important thing here is to see the multi levels of it, and that there may be an abandonment issue here with the OP because they pointed out that you don't drink with me anymore. You only do it with these people. So, see, that's a very important part of this conversation is why is that? And so I would suggest to the OP here is to make that part of the conversation. Why are you choosing to only do it with these people more frequently? And it seems like it's growing in frequency and less with me. And, uh, and that conversation could go in many, many different ways, but we're always looking for the person that's looking for help. They're typically going to carry the majority of the responsibility. So being willing to start off right off the bat, say if this person is doing this, say 3 times a week, then the very first step is, well, would you be willing to cut that back to like once a week? I'm not saying that you can't drink if it's part of the social and getting clients or something like that, but you don't have to come home completely inebriated. That's the other another variable here. Is it the drinking that is part of the job? Because that can stop after 1 or 2 drinks. Or is it inebriation? And I'm not sure what that kind of job that would be that much inebriation is necessary. So this is just kind of the first step of working with coming across an agreement is normally when you ask somebody to change something rather than giving them that ultimatum, at least try to see if they're willing to work with you with half. It's the same if somebody drinks or does some kind of substance to an abusive level. Many times the ultimatum is to stop that completely. But I would like to say, hey, start with just trying to cut it back and see if that person, if you can work together as a team to slowly cut that back, or if this is a decision that's got to be made right now.
Yeah, I would want to understand why the boyfriend in this instance feels the need that he has to do this. And again, we don't know his job. So, but I wonder if is there like an approval issue that he needs to prove or be part of one because he wants to fit in. If it is a new job, then you want to prove your worth.
Mm-hmm.
You want to fit in and you want to establish yourself in that company. But one question that I had for you, Alexander, is, or one observation that I had that I want you to reflect upon is that it kind of felt like to me that the OP and the boyfriend seemed to have a healthy relationship where they did healthy things. And then this like drinking, although it did seem like they did enjoy a night out every so often,
Sounded like it.
um, that this is like a health issue too, that I can see myself in a situation where I want a partner who is going to be on the same health resonation vibration as me, doing healthy things, because when somebody isn't healthy, taking care of themselves, it does affect the relationship. So when the boyfriend is introducing this into the relationship, I feel like that is also part of this frustration as well. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I mean that's an important part that you brought up because with the person that's getting judged for this, yeah, do they have approval issues? See, the main point here is whenever an emotional reaction happens, normally the emotional reaction has very little to do with what is actually happening. There's underlying stuff. There's similar situations that's happened in the past, or there's underlying stuff, whether it be fitting in or from one person in this situation, or being alienated and the other person feeling rejection because they're not being included. So, see, I happen to feel that those two situations are possibly more important than the amount of alcohol that's being drank, or the type many times that they're coming home inebriated in the state. And many times people will over focus or hyper focus on the situation at hand and not see these underlying situations. So when those underlying situations aren't recognized, see, the situation at hand is going to happen over and over and over. They can stop. He can stop drinking alcohol, but that's still going to be an issue because she's still going to find ways probably to feel alienated, and he's going to feel pressure to fit in, and no matter what job or social situation. So that is something very important, to always look deeper than what you think the situation is really about. And this might come down to a trust issue as well, that, the OP person here, they might have some trust issues. So yeah, this person showing up inebriated multiple times a week is making them feel insecure or non-trustworthy, those types of things, because we can't make everybody in our life be and act like how we want them to be and act. So relationships is about relating and how we're relating. Just like you said earlier, you like for somebody to be on a certain level of health regimen or interest, when you get with them. But, then what happens when you get with somebody that's, twice as hardcore as you are about that? And then you might have met that in past relationships, but now you're not meeting the level that this person is interested in health. And so, see, the shoe can be put on the other foot like really quickly. And this is why, our spiritual practice is practice faith, practice trust, learn to not judge, and then be in gratitude. And there's a lot of judgment, it sounds like, going on in this thread. But I do appreciate that this person is at least open. They're reaching out. They're asking, am I overreacting here? And I think this is a great place to just start and suggest this conversation to see what the underlying issues are really about, and maybe focus less in the agreement, um, or building up to that agreement about talking about the situation, but talking about these underlying issues that can be worked with. And then the agreement be around, okay, now that we know what we're working with, say approval issues on one side, and then alienation or rejection, abandonment on the other side. And they can work with a way to alter the situation on a daily basis to heal these underlying things that most of the time will take away the specific issue at hand. But if the specific issue at hand of the coming home inebriated is the only focus here, then there's not necessarily healing or wellness that's happening. What it is somebody is giving in to the other. And many times that will create bitterness and resentment.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a packed one. And I'm glad that you did bring in the underlying energetic and emotional reasons for the reactions and for the doings on both sides of that, because I feel like that is in every conversation, every story that we share, there's gonna be that. And if you're not getting to that internal reason, that core reason, then you're just treating the symptoms.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
symptoms or the situation at hand rather than the underlying symptoms that are causing this. And this is very common. And, this is the reason that a lot of people go to some type of therapy, is just so that they can get clarity on what is this underlying thing that I'm dealing with that I'm not even aware of. And so that's hopefully what will be some of the enjoyment of us doing this type of podcast, is to give some suggestions of what these underlying things may be, which may help some of our listeners with whatever situation that they're dealing with. And then, the most beautiful thing in my world is getting down to being able to discuss those underlying situations getting clear on where they originated, which is normally in family, around parents, relationships beforehand, and then seeing how to build towards the trust, the faith, the non judgment, and get to an agreement before a boundary has to be set. And this is what I see relationships are. They're in how we are relating here. And if we're going to be together, then let's learn to relate as optimal as possible. But see, if either one of these people feel judged in it, then see, that can create a negative, like to put up walls and a defensiveness, like right away. So, again, in your agreements and discussing the underlying situations, you want to be very compassionate and you want to be very empathetic, a willingness to see when somebody says that, oh, I'm like this because my father did this to me when I was 7 or 8 years old. That doesn't have to be an excuse, but it can be information for the other person to empathize or sympathize with. And just take a moment to put yourself in that situation, being an 8 or 7 or 8 year old and going through that and understanding why this may be creating abandonment issues, just because this is a new action and it's an action that they've done together, but now there's a certain amount of alienation and they're only doing it with their work colleagues. And that's creating, again, stirring up this insecurity or abandonment issue, where if that is focused on and taken care of, then possibly how many nights he comes home from work and whether he's been drinking or not may or may not wind up really being an issue.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to this free full version of the Wise podcast. Now, before we get back to the episode, I just want to take a second and say if you are loving what you're hearing, we do have a complete conversation premium subscription option where you can get all of our back 160 plus episodes to utilize and further your self-growth journey. And you can do that by going to the wisewisepodcast.com, click on the Get Complete button at the top, and follow the instructions. If you have any issues, you can reach out to me and I will help you take care of them. But this is for these serious individuals who are ready to take that next step, ready to make their self-growth journey a priority, ready to enhance their relationships all around, ready to accept the world for how it is and no longer be torn by the duality of the external reality. Oh, I like that. So if that's you, if you want to take that next step, consider supporting us on this journey and sharing this information. Now, if you're looking for a little more Alexander and maybe a private consultation, you can reach out to him at his website, thejustphilosophy.com, or email him at alexander@thejustphilosophy.com. On his website, you will see his different offerings, a variety of relationship coaching, energetic design consultations where we'll look at your human design chart and your destiny cards and provide a personal prescription for you. If you're in the North Carolina area, Alexander also has a variety of different sound journey events that are being posted on his website. He also is the inventor of the Vibertune sound therapy table, which 15 minutes on this vibrating table, listening to music that he composed, leaves you in a state of contentment. It feels like an energetic blanket has just laid upon you and you're back in the womb. It's a really great experience. So if you're in the North Carolina area and you want to reach out to him to even just ride the table, reach out to him at his email address. And of course, he has a variety of other tools and music that he's composed that you can get there. So anyway, with that said, I want to get you back to the rest of this episode and thank you for working on you. All right, I think we're ready to move on to the next story. Am I overreacting? Neighbor won't stop walking through my yard. The neighbor is 12. I have asked several times for her not to walk through that area of my yard, to not ride bikes through there. She does this every day, multiple times a day, encouraging other kids to do so as well. I originally had a conversation with her mother, and she told her no more bikes, but she has continued to walk through my yard. They have damaged my car, and she causes my dog to bark waking my baby from their naps.
Mm.
After telling her twice today that she needed to turn around and not walk through my backyard, her mother confronted me, yelling at me, saying it's the only way her daughter feels comfortable walking. I told her we have our own kids and animals and that she has almost been hit in the driveway multiple times. Her mother said that it isn't private property, which the OP says it is, and that she is going to tell her to keep walking through. There is a road where she can walk around right out her front door. Am I overreacting?
Well, all of these are going to be tough because they're so situational. And again, we
Yeah.
don't know the backstory, which is a big part of a private session, is getting more clarity on more details of these types of things. But bringing it up just from an initial standpoint is again, the person asking for help carries the majority of the responsibility. Also, the just philosophy points out that whatever you carry resistance to is likely to persist. So I happen to feel that if this person potentially hadn't made such a big deal about walking through the yard, then it may not have turned into the situation that it is. But now you're in what's called a power struggle. And if it is private property, one person's saying it's private property, the other person is saying that it's not private property. So that's a confusing thing right there. Because again, if it is your private property, then you do have the right to put up fencing or whatever you need to do. If you really don't want people entering into your property, then there are ways that you put fences and different things like that to accommodate that. Now, this person didn't say that they were interested in doing, they just want somebody to do what they're asking them to stop doing. And again, in relating to the world, that doesn't often work out very well because it's opposing opinions. So, again, the way that I would approach this if this was a client would be I would suggest for them to work on their resistance to this child walking through, to realize that this is more than likely a temporary thing because the child's going to grow up eventually. So, this may be years that either you have to accept and adjust to the situation, or you create a boundary, like I was talking about earlier in the previous story, of like actually spending money to build a fence and that type of thing. The other option here is just this bickering back and forth. And, you know, they might bring up, there's legal processes to go through for this, but again, it's a big inconvenience. But if it's important enough to this person to yes, to not activate the dogs barking and waking up the baby, and understand that's a very realistic view, then my suggestion is stop the resistance, take the proper channels that are available to start setting a boundary, whether that's a fencing or whatever it is, that doesn't harm somebody, but it shows that, this is pretty much what I'm talking about a boundary is. If you walk in this yard again, it's not, I'm going to do something to you or to your parents. It's that I'm just merely going to spend money on a fence and I'm going to stop this from happening. Now, somebody can complain and say, well, they shouldn't have to spend that money on the fence. Well, anytime we go to set a boundary of any type, see, we have to follow through with the consequences of that boundary. And sometimes that consequence costs money. Sometimes it costs energy. Sometimes it costs effort. It's many different things that inconveniences cost us. But the just philosophy is always coming from a wellness standpoint, not a what's fair or what's right or blah, blah, blah. It's around wellness. And whoever is being bothered by this person walking through the yard the most is going to suffer from a wellness standpoint the most. So I happen to feel that there's almost always a loving and practical way to approach almost anything. Communication in the beginning is the very first step, but it doesn't sound like they're getting anywhere with the parent. They weren't getting anywhere with the child. Now they're not getting anywhere with the parent. So the options here are that either you stop the resistance and start working on acceptance and changing your story of this person walking through your yard, or you take the necessary steps to make it a private property and to, consider that, their dog is reacting. So this again is not this person's fault that these people own a dog that gets loud whenever somebody like walks through. So whether that means that, either moving is an option or relocating the animal, or is the animal outside or inside? Can there be an adjustment made with that? Uh, the main thing here is that I want to get across to listeners is that whoever wants to initiate the change of whatever is happening, then accept the majority of the responsibility. And you don't have to get upset to make things happen. There are proper channels that you can go through. Sure, it may take weeks or months or even years, but you're choosing to have this resistance. Again, the private property and the public property is the biggest variable that it seems to be here. And it's very hard for two people to have different views on like property lines and where that is. So that plays a pretty big factor in here. But the main thing I want to get across to the listeners is that when you carry the resistance and you carry the frustration and you carry the anger, then you're the one that's going to suffer the most. And so again, it's not the strongest or the smartest that will survive. It's the one that can adapt. So this is different from just being walked on, because see, when you set boundaries, it's the opposite of being walked on. But that boundary may cost you time or energy or money or whatever that. But if it's going to give you peace in the long run, then be willing to make that investment of, like I said, either time, money, or energy to adjust the situation when you're not getting cooperation from either the child or the parent.
Yeah, for the sake of this discussion, let's just say that it is private property to make it more clear. The OP did say that there was damage to their cars at one point. Who knows if it's an overreaction
Mm-hmm.
in that sense. I chose this story because it is very close to me in my upbringing. My mom has had these situations follow her
Mm-hmm.
for as long as I can remember.
Big key.
We've always had issues with our neighbors wherever we went at when I was a child. And my mom to this day is still having issues with little kids going around her car, damaging her car. And she goes out there and she yells at them. And it gets worse.
Mm-hmm.
And the cops were called. And I I tried to tell my mom, you're creating animosity. Your resistance is creating resistance, and they're going to do something to you at some point. I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
physically, they may slash your tires. I don't know. But that resistance there, that energy that my mom puts out in this situation, where her first inclination is just to just yell at them or sternly read ask them to not do what they're doing. It usually I know my mother, so it usually comes out of nowhere. Like,
Mm-hmm.
a child may not even know that they're doing something wrong, and just because they're around her car, all of a sudden they're getting yelled at. So because there's no, like, intellectual connection to the child doing something wrong and then getting yelled at, they're just gonna get angry, and, of course, it depends on their upbringing and their relationship to their parents, but I kind of felt that same energy in this story
Mm-hmm.
where this person, we don't know if it's a male or female. I feel like that might make some difference, but maybe not, because it is the energy that you do bring to the child.
Mm-hmm.
The child is a 12-year-old child. I think it was a female child. I'm not 100% sure. I can't remember.
Right.
But I feel like the adult going to the child, to me, I can sense that the OP's energy was probably not compassionate, was probably not the energy that maybe if you were going to go to the child initially and try to, communicate, it has to be on a certain frequency. It has to be a certain energy. You can't bring your resistance to that. Child isn't going to understand,
Right.
you know? And I'll stop there and have you react to
Yeah,
that stuff.
that's important because depending on the age of the child, and if they're called a child, they're not likely to be at an age to where they understand responsibility of owning things and paying for damages and like that kind of thing. fortunately or unfortunately, children are just kids sometimes. And so that conversation with the child should be very limited, and it should be ideally done in a non-emotional way. If you approach the child and you get anger back, the true art is not for the adult to go down to the child's level. That should be seen right away. I need to talk to the parents. And so stop the conversation with the child, talk to the parents, see what kind of feedback you get from the parents. Either they're concerned and they want to help, or they're not concerned and they don't want to help. And then it may turn into that, okay, well, unfortunately or fortunately, I'm going to have to get the cops involved here. And again, once it gets to that point, then there's very little communication needs to happen between the adult and the child, or the adult with the other parent, because now that's what law enforcement is for. And then you follow the proper channels, whether that winds up having to possibly turn into getting um, an order against the family for a certain amount of distance to the property, or like I said, can a fence or something be installed, and maybe that then let the dog run around in the yard rather than possibly being chained up. Again, we don't know the situation with the dog that's going on. So this is, looking to approach these everyday life situations without activating all this emotional turmoil, because this can get out of control. These types of situations can get out of control real fast, especially when you're dealing with somebody else's children. That can be very, very sensitive to certain people. So in a lot of these scenarios, there's not going to be just one solution, because the variables are: how has the communication been given? How's the communication been received? Is there any type of agreement that has been met? If the agreement can't be met, then the next step is there's got to be a boundary set. And then somebody might say, well, it's not fair to have to pay to put up a fence to just get somebody to stay off your property. Well, if you don't want to be bothered by it, this may mean what the boundary cost is that that monetary exchange for a fence or something like that. But the most important thing from the philosophy standpoint is why truly this person is letting this child that's walking through their property bother them at this extent. Is it truly been damages to the car? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe that the person has seen something on the car, a damage, and then projected that more than likely this kid's the one that's done it. Or did they specifically see the kid do it? Again, this is where a communication with the family can be very useful, very quick. They either resonate or they don't. If they resist, then it's the next step is law enforcement, and just seeing most people just don't want to go through the chopping the wood and the carrying water, because it's inconvenient to do the proper channels to get something like this resolved, because again, this may take weeks or months or even years sometime to accomplish. But the other option is just to stay in frustration and to be bitter and angry, and like I said, fuel a flame that could get out of hand very, very quickly. Um, we just want to look from the philosophy standpoint that we're always looking how to step out of the resistance as quickly and as easily as possible. And whatever adaptations we need to make, we're willing to make. Now, see, I can say all this by going through my own trauma, going from being somebody that wasn't bothered energetically by stuff and confrontation like that, to where those types of things hurt me physically, like through pain. So, see, a lot of people that haven't gone through enough pain, they're not willing to make these types of adjustments, because they are stuck in what's fair and what's not fair. But when you get to work on an energetic level of how much anger, frustration, rage, those types of things, what they do to the body on all five of these levels, then see, it changes the way that you want to approach certain situations. And the person that's been through that type of stuff, many times they will do whatever and go through whatever channels is needed to stay calm and collected through the whole experience because they're the one that's going to pay the cost for it. And gets down to forgiveness in general. That remember that you forgiving somebody isn't for them, it's for you. And many people see again, they will hold resentment and bitterness towards somebody and not give forgiveness because they're stuck on what's fair and what's right and what's not right and that kind of thing. So they would rather torture their body over a mental concept, not just the body, but the energetic field, the emotional field, the spiritual field, all these different levels to prove somebody wrong or to prove that they're right. And from a wellness philosophy standpoint, that's not worth going through those types of battles. But at the same time, you don't just roll over and not take any action. You just merely go through the proper channels and you handle it in a way that is adult like, which when I use that term, I'm just saying non emotional is the optimal way. That okay, if you could catch the child like actually literally doing something to the car, like filming them throwing rocks at it or something like that, then that might be useful. But to just go to the parents and say, "Oh, your child's damaged my car," and they say, "Did you see them do it?" And you say, "Well, no, but I'm pretty sure that they've done it." There's not many parents that are going to not take up for their child in that situation. So, so these are suggestions toward overall wellness on 5 levels rather than so called fighting for what's fair or so called right and so called wrong.
Yeah. And I think going to the parents to discuss it, if you're in resistance, the parents are also not going to resonate with you.
Right.
They're not going to share your concern unless you go there non-emotional, but also trying to make a connection, in my opinion. Like maybe I'm naive, but when I read situations like this, I just think I think that I could communicate to the parent on an optimal level to find that like understanding so it's not like we're at odds. Kind of like how the media needs to get one group of people to see the other group as non-human so that they can just attack each other or kind of manipulate them, or kind of how when the media wants us to go to war, they'll demonize a certain group of people so that we don't care if we bomb them because we don't see them as human. When in my head, when I go to that neighbor, I want to make a human connection. I want them to see me as a person who shares emotions just like they do,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And whether that is through the words that I would use, through the energy that I bring, um, I think it does come from a sense of being humble also and not just accusing their child of doing it, but trying to get them on the same team so that they're your advocate as well. To me, getting law enforcement involved is like I would not want that to happen. That would be like my last ditch effort because once that happens, then you're not communicating anymore to that neighbor, and you have to live in this area next to this person. That's I mean your
Yep.
whole life until you move. You're there, and I don't like that and that kind of like energy
Mm-hmm.
next to me. If it does come to that, and then again, we can't control how other people react. So that's where I said I may be naive because I was naive for a while when, as other people, when you start to do this type of work, you think that just you bringing consciousness to a situation can change the situation, and that's not always the case. It
Right.
does help a lot, but it is all for you though. What you bringing the consciousness is for you and not necessarily for the entire situation because you can't control multiple people.
Yeah, and this does come down to relating, and that's what relationships is built off of, is how you relate to the person and their situation or their obstacle that they're dealing with. And most people don't want to get law enforcement involved. And that's why I'm glad to have these stories back to back because the law enforcement is the boundary that we were talking about in the other relationship to where if you cross this boundary and you come home inebriated, anymore, then I'm going to leave the relationship. That's like the police in this story. And we don't want it to get to those types of boundaries because those can be a type of ultimatum or be seen in that way. But the key here, once again, is the energy that's being brought. And normally, the person that has the issue or the problem, they don't typically take the time to realize the energy that they're getting ready to bring to this child or to this parent, because a lot of people have been mistrained that if you come with aggression, you're more likely to win. And our culture can be very bad about thinking that that's a fact. And I just don't agree with that. It's been through so much of history, whether you talk about Gandhi or Yogananda or Jesus or so many Waishors, the Buddha, like things haven't worked out for them ideally from the external person's perception. But the one main thing that they were all consistent in is how they are relating to the opposition. And that's where it's the energy that we carry. So our energy is many times depicted by the emotion that we elicit, and that emotion is controlled or directed by the judge that is in our mind about, again, right and wrong, good and bad, what's fair, what's unfair, and those types of things. But there's plenty of boundaries, and the idea of law enforcement, ideally, to do their job ideally, optimally, they don't get in that emotional state because they have a certain process that they're supposed to go through. And this doesn't happen all the time. And I know that there's so-called not optimal policemen out there, just like there is any other job. But there are optimal policemen, so they shouldn't be grouped together. So again, an honest person that is looking to resolve an issue such as this, trespassing, we'll call it. See, if they work on their emotional and energetic side, then if they do have to get the cops involved, it it carries over into that the explanation to the cops and the willingness to show proof and that you've done your due diligence before you set this boundary. And so all of this can be summed up that, again, as in the last story, this person that has this boundary issue, see, I'm willing to say that they've got boundary issues in many areas of their life. It's a lot of underlying issues that's going on here. And thank you for sharing that, with your mother that you were talking about, that you've seen her carry this. And this isn't a judgment on Aaron's mother or anybody else that goes through this. This is just patterns that we carry that if we don't learn from them, they repeat. And if we carry resistance, we have to create an opportunity for it to happen, for us to handle it differently, to graduate from that limitation. So, so these are all opportunities to grow. And it just comes down to what's more important to the person that's reaching out through these threads or through my clients. Is it wellness more important or proving yourself right and setting a boundary? Those are two different, paths. And typically I have found the highest results come from when you manage the things emotionally and energetically and spiritually and even on the physical level, when you're able to process those before going to attempt to relate to somebody, you can get very different outcomes. And this is what can turn into bullying. And when that consciousness isn't there, people just react, and you get multiple reactions back and forth, which can escalate very quickly. And something this so-called trivial could turn into something very serious, like somebody getting injured or killed or something like that over something that started off with something this simplistic. So seeing the power of energy and how you carry yourself and how you work to relate to people is very important. So see, there's nothing wrong with that person being upset that this person walked through their yard again. But before going to communicate with the child or the parent, to go sit in stillness, process that anger, that frustration, get back to a still point or a neutral point, a loving point, and then go and communicate either with the child or with the parents. Normally it's parents, ideally, when children are involved. And then make your next move off of how that energy is received. If you're attacked and they become very judgmental, then remove yourself very quickly and go to that next step, which may be the cops or some type of boundary or something like that. But if you don't even give that neutrality a chance, then just understand that you're taking that energy into the police. And then that might wind up backfiring on you, and they're becoming an issue between that person and the cops, even. That happens as well when things don't get handled the way the person wants it to be handled. And this is part of consciousness is patience and consideration, compassion for the other person with sympathy and empathy being approached so that you're able to put the shoe on the other foot. And many times that can help balance out whatever relating you're looking to go do with that other person or other people.
Yeah, and in doing this work and kind of reflecting on my mom and how she is with neighbors, I've made it a point to, be friendly with my neighbors. I like to have friendly neighbors. So when I moved here into this kind of like small neighborhood, there's a lot of kids, which I'm not used to,
Hmm.
but I would sit on my front porch, I would wave to them, they wave back. I know one of their fathers down the road, and so I always make sure I wave to his kids to keep that, that connection going. And last year, toward the end of the year, one of the kids came up and they first asked if they could come onto my property,
Mm.
which was nice.
Yep.
That was very respectful. And I said yes. And they came over and they asked me because I have a pathway in the back of my house because they have friends down the road, but this pathway leads right to their backyard.
No.
So they asked me if they could take that pathway down to the back instead of going on the road.
Right.
And I put myself in their shoes as a child,
Mm.
and I know that I would have absolutely loved that. That would have been awesome to go, like, through this pathway. You don't have to use the road. You can go down here. Because I remember being little and having our own little pathways through trees to get to certain places, and it was just fascinating to me. And so I absolutely agreed that they could do that because I know how much fun it was for me to do that.
Yes.
So just proactively, keeping those relationships in a good state, I think serves you well down the road. If you happen to have something happen, but I think even fostering those, relationships in a positive way helps to deter, any sort of resistance backlash. If you cause an issue, you might get something back in return.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a great example because one of the very first steps is, yeah, if the roles were reversed here, how could I see myself being appreciative or being judgmental or whatever that is? And this comes down to, again, just paying attention to where resistance shows up in your life. And then you getting clear in why you're carrying that resistance. And many times the situation will dissolve itself when you get clear on what the resistance is that you had the issue. Again, this was seemed optimal because they asked permission, but maybe you've made adjustments from being around your mom through these many different situations over many years, and you just learned that, hey, maybe it's just not doesn't work out that well when we just come firm like right away and try to stop the energy from flowing and completely redirect it, without having a meaningful, neutral, loving, just conversation. Because that might even come to, with your example, to where you say, I'm more than happy for you guys to use the path to get to your friend's house. But I would appreciate it if, you guys didn't play on that path because that's on my property, and then I could be liable if somebody got injured. So see, I want you to be able to utilize the path, but either get to your friend's house or please get to your house for you guys to play. And many times adults try to dominate and scare children rather than communicating with them. And that's possibly a big difference between the way you approached it, the way your mom's approached it, and the way this PO, I think we called it
OP.
OP, that sent this letter in, message in, how they initiated that contact. Because again, many people, not just with children, but will try scare tactics right away. And the less that you can show that you're affected by that, if you're on the receiving end, the more power you carry. But if you react right back, you're just giving your power away. So a big part of practicing this whole philosophy is so that you're prepared for these situations when they do show up and you handle them as optimally as possible to get the most optimal outcome.
I do feel that like when you're in a community and it is kind of like partly your responsibility to not inflict trauma on a child
Mhm.
and to kind of play that role for them so that they do start to learn to respect adults because the adults are respecting them in their communication. Like
Mhm.
I've seen, many people like get down to their level, the child's level, and speak to them like they're a human being rather than like you said, kind of commanding them to do whatever the adult wants. And
Yes.
and so you can help the world even just through these little interactions.
Yes, yes. And understand that, again, you're not working with just the situation, you're working with developing yourself so that any similar situation that comes along, you handle it more and more optimally as time goes on, rather than it continuing to be a constant that this is a problem and that pattern continues because the resistance hasn't been worked on at all. The empathy, the sympathy, the relating, none of that. It's just, this is what I want and you are not giving me what I want. Therefore, I want to dominate or bully you. And again, this has been fun to discuss these couple of different scenarios here today and bringing just real life situations to see that a big part of this is to see that things aren't just black and white, that there are many shades of gray. The variables are very, very important, but the main thing when you generalize stuff is why, for the person that's looking to grow, is to question, why am I carrying resistance to this? What is this connected to in my past? And what can I do moving forward to not experience this on a continuous basis? And that's what we call self development work in general terms.
Yeah. So if you guys are interested in a personal consultation with Alexander, you can hit him up at Alexander at thejustphilosophy.com or his website, thejustphilosophy.com. Or if you have a story that you want us to discuss on the air, you can reach me at Aaron, Aaron, at wisewisepodcast.com. I definitely enjoy this. It's cool getting different input on different stories that we wouldn't normally talk about because, in our lives, we wouldn't, have these
These
two stories
situations.
happen in our lives.
Right.
So it's good to bring in some of the stuff that other people may experience and then expand it on not just that particular situation, like in the case with the boyfriend drinking, but it can be anything. It can be playing video games. It can be overeating. It's not necessarily about the actual object or the action. It's about the energy behind it. So,
Right.
um, I really appreciated these stories and the wisdom that Alexander has shared, and you guys for joining along.
Yeah, thank you for the idea, Aaron, and it was a good first run. And we'll see if this is useful to continue going in this direction. Beautiful.
Appreciate you guys.
Much love.
Thank you for listening to this free version of the Wise podcast. To hear the complete conversation and go deeper into the application of the tools and techniques of the Just Philosophy, head on over to wisewisepodcast.com and become a premium member. You'll get to hear all of our complete conversations, including the complete episodes of our Inward Journey story series and our entire back catalog, and continue your self-development journey with us. We honor your dedication to self-growth, overall wellness, and continuing to ask the wise whys.
And remember, gradual changes over long periods of time equals lasting results.
Continue on your self-growth journey by visiting thejustphilosophy.com, where you are able to connect personally by booking a private consultation with Alexander in person, by phone, or Zoom. Uncover your authentic self more easily with a human design or destiny card consultation. Here you will gain information about your energetic makeup, personality, and your higher self, as well as navigating your way through your relationships.
There are also multiple types of reports available for purchase that help you gain insight into your career, relationships, and opportunities for self growth. The site also allows you to view a calendar of Alexander's live performances and class schedule, peruse other products such as shirts, CDs, and finally, the revolutionary VibroTune vibrational sound therapy tables. These contoured therapy tables allow you to bathe in a vibrational sonic bath of frequencies, bringing you into alignment on all levels. You will be feeling and hearing calming music synced through vibration and frequency. So again, you can grab all this goodness at thejustphilosophy.com, thejustphilosophy.com. The Just Philosophy, as discussed in this podcast, has been developed by Alexander over the last 25 years in his personal studies, private practice, and professional environment. The information discussed is intended for educational purposes only and is not meant as a replacement for conventional medicine. Just remember, knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. Seek the wise. We want to thank you for working on you. Keep shining your light and refining your vibe.